pleased that he joins us, is Dovid Zaklikowski. I hope I pronounced it correctly. Did I pronounce it correctly, David?
Or Zach. I'm sure.
Or Zach? They call you Zach?
They call me Zach.
They call him Zach. Okay, he's a prolific writer. I mean, I saw the book Dear Rebbe, and I thought, oh, that's a great book. But he sent me, bro, I think around 20 other books that he's written. So prolific writer, and we'll talk about maybe some of the other books too. But Dear Rebbe is a fascinating book coming out in time for the Rebbe's Yahrzeit, where the Rebbe corresponds with a singer, a writer, a sculptor, Holocaust survivor, and it's just out there. So welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's truly an honor. I must say that sitting here in a bunker somewhere far away, who knows where, on a beach, is pretty amazing to sit with one of my heroes, Zev Brenner, who I grew up with in my grandfather's house. I'll never forget sitting and listening to Dov Shurin and over his matzah bread that he used to make with on Matzah Shabbos. So it's truly an honor for me to be here together with you tonight. And,
well, thank you as well. And I'm impressed with it. First of all, where you're writing about the correspondence, what impresses me is that you don't just take the letters, like, here's the letter that the person wrote, and you show the Rebbe's letter, and you just letters. What you did, which is a lot more time consuming, you incorporated the letters into a story, into a narrative.
Correct. So my goal has always been, for many, many years, my grandfather, Rabbi Bucket, gave me my first collection of letters to Professor Green, and I felt like these are wonderful letters, but what's the story behind them? And ever since, I've been collecting letters, but this book specifically, these 4 people were chosen because not only did I have the letters of the Rebbe to the people, I had, first of all, their letters to the Rebbe himself, which took a long time to obtain every single one of those letters.
How'd you get them?
So the goal was to go through archives to find the letters in these people's archives. I need to get permission from various people to make copies of those letters, to quote those letters. Some of those letters, let's say from Chaim Grada, were actually dug up in Zalman Shazar's, President Zalman Shazar in Israel's archive he was very close to, and he made copies of them, sent to him. They were released to me for this book. That means that literally we got them from the archive for the Rebbe. And then for Jack Lifshitz, the famous sculptor, we had to actually find those letters in his archive because they're in French and they're never filed correctly in his archive in Washington, D.C. So that was a work in itself. And then to get them translated, figure out what its drafts were, what was more closer to what he sent. And this was a fascinating, digging up research. So part of what I do is not just sitting there, in my house and just collecting stuff, but actually going through and getting my hands dirty and my feet dirty and my pants dirty. Digging through. I sit for many, many long hours in places digging up papers. And in addition to that, the reason why this is unique, these 4 people are unique, and I tell people, why did I choose these 4 people?
Yeah, why you pick these 4 people?
Because I actually have their stories. So I've been collecting for many, many years, going through all different kind of archives, getting their interviews. I sat in Momo for a day listening to Jack Lifshitz interviews that are not available anywhere else, which he's given over the years in this theater, fascinating theater. I mean, Momo is legendary. But I was sitting there by myself on the floor, typing up my laptop because they refused to let me record the interviews, for copyright reasons. Sitting there, and that all these experiences are just every single time, every single place, every single new piece of information. And I worked on this book for close to 16 years.
16 years.
Correct. Gathering the information. A lot of patience, and I could just say, I believe that we got a full picture of these people and what did Lubavitcher Rebbe, affect them. It could be didn't affect them at all. And that's also fascinating in and of itself.
Well, let's tell our audience who the people that you profiled in there.
Sure. So you have first the famous singer that many people of this station, I'm sure, may know, Jan Pierce, especially long-time listeners. He was one of the longest opera singer in the history of the United States, going back to early 1900s, until he sang, we now know, being pushed endlessly by Lubavitcher Rebbe to continue to singing, believing that will give him life and continue to throughout the years. And you have Jack Lifshitz, which is a famous sculptor. His sculptures are in front of the Philadelphia City Hall. And Los Angeles, on Columbia University in New York City, and many other places, including in Israel, all over Israel, including Mount Scopus, is one of huge sculptures. And then you have famous writer Chaim Grad, a Yiddish writer. Today he's back. At one point, for many years, he became unknown because his wife refused to let his writings be translated into English. They're currently working on it again after she died. And then there is Ron Lauder and David Chase. Very fascinating chapter in the history of bringing Judaism back to Poland, which Ron Lauder, as everyone may know, the Lauder Foundation was involved. But that Lauder Foundation, the creation of it, Rabbi Besser and the Lubavitcher Rebbe were very instrumental in the creation and keeping it in Poland. Like you'll see for the very first time, the story in the Rebbe is being reported in full.
By the way, was there any correspondence between the Rebbe and Shlomo Carlebach? I was just curious.
Most definitely, there's a lot of correspondence between the Rebbe and Shlomo Carlebach.
That would be fascinating to put in a book too, right?
Most definitely, one day there needs to be done. I'm actually working on an autobiography of Shlomo Carlebach's sister-in-law, Rebbetzin Carlebach, Rabbi Chaim Carlebach, the famous Rabbi Chaim Carlebach. And over there, there's fascinating letters that I've seen for the very first time about his, the process of him getting married. And those are fascinating letters in and of itself. And I look forward to one day, publishing them.
Now, by the way, the book has pictures in there accompanying every page, which I like. And I said, you have some interesting stories. Let's look at Chase. He was a multimillionaire. Wasn't really that observant, but he got in touch. Somehow he got in touch with the Rebbe, and they corresponded, and they helped build the Rabbinical College in Morristown, New York, which is an interesting story. Let's look at David Chase.
Sure. So I think this is fascinating. I would say all four of these writers come from Orthodox families, and were religious to a certain extent. These were not the ignoramus people. They had knowledge about Yiddishkeit, about Torah, about mitzvahs. And a great example is David Chase, who was a Holocaust survivor, and he basically reached out by Rabbi Herson, and he became a supporter of the Rabbinical College at that point of New Jersey.
Well, what happened was originally they were in a different part of New Jersey,
in
right?
Newark, and then because of the riots and became dangerous, they had to be forced to move out. I don't know if anyone remembers the riots that were literally 5 blocks away from the school, a one-house school. And what happened was that, so that they're looking for places and they know where to go, and they're looking for large campus. And the Rebbe basically tells them Morristown's the best because for American students. But this is a crazy idea when they were just in one house in Newark. Yes, it was a large house, maybe with 30, 40 students. And all of a sudden they're going to that campus, which could fit, today has close to 400, 500.
But that Rebbe, I think the Rebbe surprised everybody because he had a very big vision where he said, let's go big, let's get a great place. And that's how they end up in Morristown, right? Because they weren't thinking that big.
Correct. So like if you in general, like a very interesting, always try to get bigger, always try to look to the future. Many people struggle with it, including Lubavitchers had very struggled with this concept. I sat down with someone who had a printing press once in Brooklyn, and basically they told him to modernize your machines. They couldn't see further, and they went defunct shortly thereafter because they weren't willing to grow bigger. They saw things as go bigger, push yourself, and there was the future. So Lubavitch at that point is this tiny organization that says, go bigger. This is not just bigger. This is huge and in a huge sense. And shocking.
Well, wasn't a place where nuns lived?
Correct. It's a former place where a monastery is, and they purchased off the monasteries at that point were slowly going defunct.
The asking price was about $1.2 million, and they got a bargain. They got it at a very cheap price.
Correct. So they sort of split it off, and there's a lot of legends about the place, but I can't report on them because I never, did a firm, reported. Something very important to me is the footnotes. You'll see that every single piece of information someone told me, I try to confirm it with another detail from somewhere else, at least one more source or actual document in it. And I've left out stories people that I could not confirm inside this book. It's very important for me personally, as a journalist and trying to make this as accurate as possible.
I noticed there's a Yankel Rosenbaum connection.
Correct. So actually, it's fascinating is
let's tell everyone who Yankel Rosenbaum. He was killed in the Crown Heights pogrom in 1991, and he was a rabbinical student. But he was supposed to be a Chabad shliach, if I remember reading what you wrote.
Correct. So Rabbi Besser, who I actually interviewed several times.
That's Rabbi Chaskel Besser.
Chaskel Besser, fascinating human being, and with a very, very, big heart. And interviewed him, and he told me that what happened was, which is if the way it's for many years the story was believed that the Rebbe did not want to have a Chabad house in Poland, and then all of a
why didn't the Rebbe want a Chabad house in Poland?
The belief was that because that what happened there, that the Rebbe didn't want to have a place in such a country. So
because it was steeped with Jewish blood. Is that what?
That's what people walked around saying for many years.
Because Ukraine, wasn't there in Ukraine a Chabad house?
Yeah, that's many years after.
So but at this point there was no in countries where Jews were killed. He didn't have a Chabad house.
And then all of a sudden, 1 week, the Rebbe speaks about having something similar to a Chabad house in Poland, which then all of a sudden hit for me a contradiction. So then I'm doing research and figuring it out, and I basically track down the full-on details of the story. The Rebbe wasn't against having Chabad house there, but rather he didn't want to bring unaffiliated Jews from the Soviet Union to Poland, where there's no Jewish infrastructure. So
I think we should backtrack a little bit, because what happened is that the thinking of Rabbi Chaskel Bess or Ron Lauder, or you'll correct me, whoever it was, is that in order to ensure that there's some Jewish life in Poland, while the goal was to bring them to Israel, but until they got to Israel, you wanted to sustain Jewish life there. So they wanted to bring in about 100 people from Russia, from the Soviet Union, to be the teachers, to help the community, and the Rebbe was opposed to that.
So what actually happened was like this. It's very similar. So they wanted to bring hundreds of people, or close to 1,000 at least the first time, from the Soviet Union, and bring them there, and then they would slowly bring teachers there to support them. The Rebbe felt that these people should never be brought to somewhere where there's no Jewish infrastructure, and then later on seeing to support them. First, you bring the infrastructure there, and for the people who actually live there. So if it's the locals who are actually coming out from hiding, and Rabbi Besser speaks about this all the time, and Rabbi Shudrich, but these are the chief rabbi of Poland. These people were guided step by step inside their actually being in Poland. So people didn't know this, and I actually slowly revealed the documents and all different kind of responses that the Rebbe gave as I documented, that the Rebbe was never against having it there. What the Rebbe didn't want was to bring an influx of 1,000 people. They're not going to have any Jewish infrastructure. Rather, send them to Israel and let them have the infrastructure there to tap into.
Forget me. Wasn't the problem he felt if we just sent people from Russia, they themselves will become assimilated in Poland because there's no infrastructure. So if you're going to send anybody to Poland, to people who are educators that won't necessarily be assimilated, as opposed to just sending random people from Russia just to create a community.
So like the educators should be there. That means that you shouldn't stop the educators from going there, and the shochet and the rabbis from going there. Build the infrastructure for them, and that's what Rabbi Shudrich was doing. And with the blessings, with the guidance, and with the input, and with the the regular responding to his questions about what to do there in Poland, which is fascinating in of itself. And I spoke to Rabbi Shudrich, at length for this book, including Rabbi Besser's son, because keep in mind that Rabbi Chaskel Besser passed away. I was doing this research for this book for close to 16 years, and Rabbi Besser passed away in the meantime. So I continued to do my research with them, and I've interviewed a lot of people who are involved in the Lada Foundation in Poland, including Rabbi Biderman, who first brought Rabbi, I'm saying at that Ambassador Lauder to actually be involved in Jewish institutions in general. He's the Chabad, shliach or rabbi in Austria, which is a fascinating story in and of itself, documented here in this book. So the actual step by step is documented here, how the Rebbe was involved in it and slowly took away that myth of, for the very first time, that there didn't want in Poland, and today there actually is, I think, 3 Chabad houses in Poland.
You mentioned Rabbi Stambler, who's
Rabbi Stambler,
who's
and
involved
then
in
in
helping the
Krakow.
refugees from the Ukraine
Correct,
right now.
and there's Rabbi Grari in Krakow, which was the famous story of him being locked out of the shul for a while. So there are today infrastructure. They're not there to bring people there, but they're actually there. Currently, there's a lot of Israeli business people and a lot of visitors, and they're actually Jews from Poland in and of itself, and that they're assisting.
Fascinating what's going on. And we saw it with Yankel Rosenbaum. He was supposed
Correct.
to.
So Yankel Rosenbaum. So that right after Shabbos, like so he knew Rabbi Besser. He was a very interesting person, Mr. Rosenbaum. So he actually was very much into history, and he actually was working on a book at that point, and other things which I have copies of that I hope one day to actually use for other research. But my point is that he actually called up right after Shabbos after that talk, and he says, "All right, Besser, I'm ready to go." And then sadly, shortly thereafter, he was killed during the '99 summer riots in Crown Heights, which is a tragic story.
Wow.
But I was happy to include him here to give a little memory that what he was willing to do, and it's in the footnotes a little bit more about it of the story.
David Chase was a multimillionaire. How did he get in touch with the Rebbe? And did he turn observant? Because I know for a while he wasn't, even though the Rebbe got him to put on tefillin at some point. But he was involved. But that wasn't a barrier to having a relationship with the Rebbe, that he wasn't observant.
I'll say something fascinating, because I know that listening to Zev shows, just recently, a few weeks ago, he interviewed Rabbi Ephraim Goldberg, a really wonderful rabbi from Boca Raton. My uncle is a Chabad rabbi in Boca Raton. They're very close, Rabbi Salman Buket. And I've gone to the Boca Raton synagogue many times, and it's just fascinating. It's not just, you didn't touch it in your interview with him. Rabbi Ephraim Goldberg is legendary for having in Boca Raton synagogue so many different streams, and being accepting of every single stream of Jews, if it's Sephardi, there's a Chabad shul inside the Boca Raton synagogue. So you spoke about like being accepted, about the nuances, about accepting someone for love. The Rebbe took this as a philosophy for many years, ingrained into his followers' head, into the Chassidim head, something that it's not just, I could disagree strongly with a person. He's not only mistaken, he's not only, I could strongly disagree, something you see over here, but total acceptance of the person beyond, in extreme ways. That means these people, I once wanted to write about them for I'm not going to say the magazine, for a Haredi magazine about Yehuda Avner and Menachem Begin, and they told me, no, we can't write about them because they were once Orthodox and now that they're not Orthodox. And I was like shocked to me. So the Rebbe took that extreme, total acceptance beyond. It's not just because, I have to love him, but the Rebbe saw a person to the extreme. That means he disagreed.
Well, he didn't like the labels of Orthodox and conservative before. He says, I think he used the words observant and non-observant.
He didn't use even observant, non-observant. You were a Jew, and that's a fascinating thing. It's not like you didn't have a background. It's not like you're Orthodox, Reform, or conservative. He said that labels are for shirts. Is 2 or 3 times he actually wrote that in letters, and that's the way he took it. He took it to the extreme. So David Chase, he never even, there was no question David, do you do mitzvahs? Maybe I shouldn't keep you in my orbit or anything. It was total welcoming, and it wasn't just for him. It was from, obviously, because he's David Chase, I have now a story here that I can actually do because we have so much information about him. He gave interviews, and I could write about it.
But did they eventually come observant? That he put on to him, did he eventually come observant?
So, but obviously, to the Rebbe was he was promoting mitzvahs, and slowly, piece by piece, understood the people, when he could push, when he can't push. And this there's several stories of this actually happening inside this book. Sometimes we think that the Rebbe was like some kind of neo Orthodox, the Rebbe was very strong, but he had to know how to do it, and even if he failed, then it was okay. So he got David Chase to put on tefillin every single day. He actually purchased for David Chase from Mr. Chase 3 pairs of tefillin, one for his house in Connecticut, and one for his yacht, and one for his home in Boca Raton, Florida. So he actually purchased, the best and the most muhudar. It's a funny story. I'll just tell it to you. It's not
I
actually.
didn't think they actually sent the check for that too, right? For $1,800.
He wanted to send, like, the Rebbe's like, this is my thing. But $1,800 to him was, a big joke. I'm gonna say a funny thing. So the Rebbe asked, a scribe, a sofer, to write the tefillin. He's right. I need 3 pairs of tefillin. So the guy's like sending questions to the Rebbe. Like he wants to, like, get, like, the tricks that the Rebbe wants. That would be, like, historical. The Rebbe's guiding him how to make a pair of tefillin. The Rebbe sent a message to him, says, stop, stop here. This is just for someone else. So it was actually a fascinating action. And then he put on mezuzahs on his doors. And then the Rebbe tried to get him. He had a radio station. Tried to get him to make sure the radio station, if it's working on Shabbos, so then it should trying to work with the government, that should be sold to another entity, on Shabbos while it's working, with like a heter iska. But the problem was that you were not allowed, that would be totally illegal to sell to someone without them being a part of the licensing process. And they actually tried to pull a lot of strings in Washington D.C. It was a very contentious time between Mr. Chase and I recorded here. Mr. Chase said that he'd rather not, if he can't listen to the Rebbe, that he would totally give up his relationship with the Rebbe. It was a very, very tense period of time, and the Rebbe, to him it was, this is we could try to do it, and we want to do it, but it does nothing to do with our relationship. He told Jack Lifshitz, after extremely tense correspondence, that some kind of 70 pages, not inside the book, but 70 pages, physical pages, that letters, which, to know the Rebbe, even fathom this concept, if you think about on one topic, to be so many letters back and forth, usually the Rebbe stopped correspondence when he felt that, it's not continuing, after 1 or 2 back and forths. He used to stop it. And over here, the Rebbe just continues on and on and on and on. And then at the end, Mr. Lifshitz basically says, like, it's not really nothing to do with me, it's on someone else. And the Rebbe tells him back, I hope that relationship is, I'm not God's policeman. And I always say, like, what is that supposed to mean, not God's policeman? You just wrote to a guy dozens of pages, you're saying you're not God's policeman. What is that supposed to mean? So I say like this, that you can think about it, that what does a policeman do? A policeman is not only going to, telling you what to do, he's actually enforcing it. He's saying, listen, I'm not your boss. I'm coming here. I have a message from God. I have a message from Hashem. There's a Torah, there's mitzvahs, and I'm just telling you what to do. I'm not the policeman. We're here. We're just together. We're 2 Jews together, bringing. We're sitting here, riding back and forth. We love each other.
So what you're saying is, with the Rebbe, while he wanted people to become more observant, he knew how far to push and to withdraw.
Yeah, he understood that it's not going to work. There's another fascinating story in this book about Jan Pierce, and the Rebbe's trying to get him to stop this, doing concerts on Shabbos. So he writes a letter, after he falls down several times, he's actually doing concerts now because the Rebbe is pushing him to do concerts, not because he himself necessarily wants to do it. The Rebbe is telling him to continue to do to do concerts, and then he writes this long letter to him saying that maybe it's a good idea to start keeping Shabbos. And John Pierce's wife, who's already keeping Shabbos because a Chabad rabbi encouraged her to do it, she's keeping Shabbos herself. And actually, John Pierce used to say, she used to come out in the middle of the concert, she'd say, "Welcome to my wife, the Shomer Shabbat." So she used to greet him, and he himself. So the Rebbe tries to get him, and she intercepts the letter and writes back to the Rebbe, "This is really hard for me to say, to actually say this, but I don't think that it's possible for my husband to keep Shabbos, and I'm withholding this letter." So the Rebbe actually wrote her a fascinating letter in of itself, that first of all, giving different people who had very successful jobs, keeping Shabbos, and even fascinating of itself, he brings proof from someone who's a Seventh Day Adventist, which is like fascinating that there brings proof from someone, actually a Jew who was a Seventh Day Adventist. That means Bobby Fischer, the famous chess player. So there brings proof from him himself, which is I would say mind-boggling. So and then he's telling her, "I believe more in your husband's capabilities of doing it." At the end, the Rebbe got him to to stop to keep Shabbos. So that's a great story in the book. The Rebbe was accepting of a person to the extreme, but with that, anyone who who knows the Rebbe's teachings, was extreme when it came to keeping halacha, and in of itself, fought many battles to keep it, but knew how to do it and when to do it. Or for you to judge.
Okay, we are back. And just a reminder that we're also with you on today's Sunday on WOR 710 a.m., 9 to 10 p.m. Pat Boone, the legendary singer, one of the biggest names in American music, also a strong supporter of Israel, wrote the song for Exodus. He'll join us at 9 p.m. tonight. You don't want to miss that. And keep those, if you want to win tickets to the Young Israel Long Beach concert with Simply Tzafat, Monday night, July 4th. Keep those emails coming to us, zevbrenner@gmail.com. Please put tickets in the background. And we are going to give away a book, Dear Rebbe. We're going to give away to some listeners tonight. Send us a letter, send us an email with your name, address, and phone number, and put down Dear Rebbe. The bottom. We're going to give away some books as well. It's a fascinating book. Live in our studios is Dovid Zaklikowski. He's written 20 books. His new book is called Dear Rebbe, with Rabbi Menachem Mendel Shearson, correspondent with a singer, a writer, a sculptor, and a Holocaust survivor. And it's a fascinating book. And there's one, we're going to take some phone calls in just a moment. If you want to email us, we'll take that too. There's a story about Chaim Grad, I believe, the Yiddish writer who wasn't religious. He comes from a religious background. He writes wonderfully about life in Europe. There's a Chabad rabbi who tried to bring him into the Rebbe, and he brought the Chabad rabbi who was going off the derech back to Yiddishkeit. What's the story with that?
That's a fascinating story. So Chaim Grada, as we said, was Orthodox before the war, and then slowly went off the way. He was a yeshiva bacher, I would say, and a very, very study partner to Chazan Ish himself, Rabbi Shai Karlitz.
He was a brilliant man, Chaim Grada.
Most definitely not only a brilliant man. He understood what he was saying, learning Gemara, Talmud, or the like. And the Rebbe tried to get him to slowly, piece by piece, take on a little bit of Yiddishkeit. And one of the things was put on tefillin. And the Chabad rabbi in Miami Beach at that point was sent. Chaim Grada was in the hotel over there. Was sent to go meet him. It's a long story in the book, documented, but he actually got Chaim Grada to put on tefillin for the very first time, and he was crying in his room. And every single day that he was in Miami at that point, the Chabad rabbi would bring him tefillin. And then originally he brought him small pair of tefillin. He told him that it's a Mickey Mouse tefillin. I need large tefillin. And then the Rebbe actually purchased for him a pair of tefillin, and he started putting it on. Then he sent him matzah, and he started keeping, piece by piece. He obviously didn't change his life, that we all know, but the concept is that basically the story is that that specific Chabad rabbi, which was shocking to me when I was going through Grada's papers. The Grada's papers was found in, I think, 5 different archives, slowly gathering them together until finally Yivo purchased it after his wife died. A long story. They didn't have an estate. It was actually was taken over by the New York State, who actually sold it to Yivo, and I think the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. Literally piece by piece, letter by letter, obtaining, and Chaim Grada says this story about how the Chabad rabbi comes to him and tells him that he's having how do we say, doubts about his belief in God, and he has long bushy hair on his head. He's coming and delving into all different kind of ideas from Spinoza, etc. And I was shocked by this and thought perhaps this is some kind of fiction. I had a lot of research, including reaching out to the Chabad rabbi. Unfortunately, he didn't let me use his name, which I still until today feel bad that I couldn't use it. So from Grada's letters itself, we don't know his name. I know his name because of the story, and then verified with many other people involved in the story that truly happened to him. And basically, Grada told him that we're after the Holocaust. We need every single Jew. At one point, maybe it was just about yourself. It's not about yourself, and you need to buckle up and start believing in God again. Which is a fascinating detail. What happened was afterwards that he gave an interview, and this is actually in the footnotes. He gave an interview to some Chabad amateur magazine, basically stating that his version of events that he wanted to spin. And I at that point, Yivo had just sent me a letter which confirmed, the way Chaim Grada, the letter that he wrote to Chaim Grada, which confirmed the details. And I just juxtaposed both of them in the footnotes. It's your decision to decide if you believe the story or not. I bring his interview, that guy's letter. I'm saying his letter to Chaim Grada, and you be the judge of the story. Like a lot of other things, I hope that you look in the footnotes to see how I actually came to the conclusions that I did, and hopefully you could come to your own conclusions when you're reading the book.
Let's go to Aryeh and Flatbush. Thank you for waiting. You have a question for our guest. Just have to put on your headphones. Aryeh, you there?
Yes. Yes. Hi. A couple of things you said before. Excuse me if I'm being over cynical, but Bobby Fischer was an avowed atheist, and if you're insinuating that he flirted with Shabbos as a Seventh-day Adventist, that would have nothing to do with Judaism. That's the first thing, and the second thing is about Jan Pierce. I would like to see proof that Jan Pierce actually made a commitment to keep Shabbos, because if he did, and I'm very skeptical if he really made a commitment. It sounds like a wonderful happy ending, but if he really did, if anything, it would be because his wife intercepted the letter, which could be Hashgacha Pratis too. But I would be very skeptical to see if Jan Pierce actually made that commitment, beyond just a showing to appease the Rebbe.
So it's fascinating. Thank you very much for your question. So Jan Pierce actually tells a newspaper, the Buffalo, I think the Jewish Times. I quoted inside the book. You can read it and decide on your own one more time what the actual what happened. And I most definitely accept anyone else's comments and your judgment. It's more than you know what I mean. That's besides, in addition to actually hearing from people at the end of his life who he's very close to about him keeping Shabbos. So.
And what about Bobby Fischer?
Bobby Fischer, if he was a Seventh-day Adventist or not, one more time, that's not applicable to my book. What I was saying was that basically, even if he wasn't, I'm just saying that the Rebbe actually brought proof of it from there. If that's true, that you could do up, if you actually was a Seventh-day Adventist or not, that you could go to Google. And
he was an atheist, but he was an atheist, Bobby Fischer.
That could be. I'm not.
So what does that have to do with keeping Shabbos?
Wait, but Dovid is saying the Rebbe kept in touch and had relationship. Didn't care. I mean, he did care, but it wasn't a barrier to the Rebbe having a relationship with somebody if they were not observant. And I would assume that would apply to Bobby Fischer, even if it was an atheist or a Seventh-day Adventist.
Oh, is that what he's indicating? That Rebbe had a relationship with Bobby Fischer?
Correct. The Rebbe it's actually in the introduction to the book, in the preface, how the Rebbe tried to bring him back through a famous writer, through his name is Sam Reshevsky, to try to bring him back into the fold. It may have been naive, you could say, of trying to meet with him and trying to convince him that he shouldn't be so outspoken against his Judaism. Some people say, and this is one more time, I am not going to say now, some people say that immediately after that letter, he became much more extreme against Judaism from that reaching out. But that's a separate issue that needs to be still more research to be done on exactly the correlation, the dates. But I welcome you to take the book and then figure out the dates and everything and come to your own decision.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for a good call. Okay, so let me ask you this. With the Rebbe's Yard site that's coming about, and I know that there's something special that's going to be taking place. So, how are you commemorating it?
For me to commemorate the Rebbe's Yard site, of course, many people, it will be probably thousands and thousands of people going to his resting place, the Oel, for Shabbos, because that's the way it falls out this year. People will be going before, being going after. But for me, is actually trying to understand what he was trying to do. So a lot of people will be telling you miracle stories. Will be throwing around videos and voice notes, wonderful things. But to me, it's about what the Rebbe was trying to do, and for me to be more accepting to another person, even though I strongly disagree with them. For me to figure out in my mind how to be more positive in my language, how to be more positive in the way in the way I think. These are powerful ideas that the Rebbe taught. I actually wrote a series called Advice for Life, which has since I started, is 13 volumes to the series, has sold over 500,000 copies. And I welcome the ideas of taking that and taking some of it at least, or reading it and deciding on your own what you want to implement into your life. For me, I'm always learning new material, finding new things, and I hope that I could implement into my life some of his teachings.
How does that whole belief that the Rebbe is Mashiach, how does that affect when you're out there, you're speaking and you're writing? Does that affect how people view the Rebbe? Is that something which is not as big an issue today as it was? What are you finding?
So I go on giving lectures. You have to keep in mind that I am an archivist, a writer. I sit in a bunker almost like yours, Zev. Not as nice and not as beautiful on the outside, and live in the past. Some people say, "Oh, like, do you find this interesting?" I'm like, no. When after it happens, let me know, and I'll actually do your research. But when I go around giving lectures around the United States, people already moved on. In my, from what I hear, it's a non-issue. It's like surprising for me when I walk around the streets and see, some 30 students plastering New York with stickers. To me, it's sort of like, it's amazing that we live in a time that 30 guys could do something like this. So keep in mind that you can make a change and plaster the world with some good. Smile to someone. The Rebbe walked around the streets of Crown Heights, you would think that he had a lot on his mind. I'm sure he did, but smile to people, to women, to children. If the person, let's say, didn't want to waste the Rebbe's time and stood far away, walked across the street to greet them. And I wish I could do it myself. I walk around the streets myself, saying good morning, people. I'm an introvert. I don't know if you want to, but many people would call me that. It's very difficult for me, but I think about it. And I try to go across the street, say hello to people, greet them as much as I could. I'm not successful always, but I try.
We're back on final stretch. If we're going to give away a couple more copies of the book, send an email to zevbrenner@gmail.com. Put Dear Rebbe in the byline. You get this fascinating book. Our guest live in studio. I thank Menachem Ben Shimon for arranging for that tonight and actually coming in and making sure Dovid gets here. Dovid Zaklikowski. The book is called Dear Rebbe. And let's go to Shimon Jacobson. Go ahead. Shavua Tov. Thank you for joining us on the radio. Go ahead. Your question or comment.
Yeah, hi. Good to Zev.
Good luck.
Yeah, I'm listening to all the beautiful comments about the Rebbe, and the whole thing with the Rebbe was he was all accepting a Jew. Did it make a difference on his religion? Did it make a difference how much he knows how to learn? It was a soul. He's talking to the neshama of every Jew. And there was a small story that happened in the 70s. There was a wrestler who was a major. I don't remember the name, but he was a famous wrestler. He was knocked out in the ring. Basically, he had an afterlife. He was told that he passed on in the ring, and he got up 20 minutes later. The doctor said that you are dead, and he was like, he came back. So they tried to cure him, and he was in the hospital. And the Rebbe used to go on cable TV in those days. They had the Farbrengens. It was live on TV. And he was turning the channel, and as he's in the hospital, and he says, I know that man. This rabbi. He said, I know him from somewhere, and he remembered when he passed on, and he came back. He said, this is the man who saved my life. So he tells the nurse, this is in Oklahoma. He says, I got to meet this man. He said, she doesn't know how to get to this man. He says, you're in the hospital right now. How are you gonna? First, maybe she's delusional or whatever. He says, no, this is the man who saved my life. And he started remembering that when he went up in Shemayim, he saw this Lubavitcher Rebbe.
And when did the story take place?
In the mid 70s.
Mid 70s. Okay.
Yeah, early
Anyway, I
so he
go ahead. Yeah.
Basically, it's all documented. And the Rebbe, he decided he must come to. He found that the Rebbe's in Brooklyn. He decided to go to Brooklyn and to meet the Rebbe. This guy was like 6'7", and they see this big guy coming in. He's band-aid up still, and they said, I got to meet the Rebbe. They said they got scared. Who's this guy? Big man, big. So in those days it was much easier to get in by Yechidus.
But Simon, we're almost out of time. I'm sorry to cut you.
Yeah. Bottom line is, he goes in, and the Rebbe told him, I saved you, and I'm here. It was Sukkot. Here's a little of an esrog. This is the first mitzvah you're gonna do, and that's the beauty of the Rebbe. It was all about getting a mitzvah, and it didn't make a difference where the Jews
anyway,
from.
thank you for your call. On behalf of squeezing one more call, but son, give me a call. I'd like to hear from you. Good to hear from you again.
You too.
Sure. By the way, let's give out people can get a discount for the book. We're getting a lot of people wanting the free book, but if they can buy the book, where can they do so?
DearRebbe.com. And if you put in the promo code tonight and tomorrow for the next week, Talkline, you will get 20% off of that book or any other book you would want.
What's that? DearRebbe.com?
DearRebbe.com. DearRebbe.com.
Let's go to Muncie, New York. Rabbi Nussin Leiter. You'll be the final word tonight. Good luck.
Yes, thank you for taking the call. I just wanted to encourage our listeners, when they vote in the primary, if they've not done so already, that they should vote, and encourage others to vote for morality, vote for Kavod Shamayim, in light of the recent decision by the Supreme Court, which I've not gotten a chance to review yet.
And we're going off the topic, but I do thank you. I urge everybody, primary, that you must vote. I don't care if you're on vacation, whatever it is, you have to vote.
Right. I just want to emphasize that it should be based on moral values, and there will be more of an assault on moral values in the liberal states after this decision. We should make education a top priority.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'm so happy to hear from you, but we're going off topic, but thank you for your phone. We have literally a moment left. So what do you want to share with our audience as we sign off, David?
First of all, it's been one of the greatest honors to sit in this legendary bunker at 1 a.m. So I thought
the bunker was underground. I'm above ground, but okay.
So I want to, for me, anyone who knows me, I need my sleep. And when Zev said, "Oh, maybe after midnight," I said, "Even if it's 1 o'clock, you still want to come on?" And I thought to myself, there's a story by Rabbi Kramer in Montreal, who basically was going to build the yeshiva there, like we were saying about that Rebbe did from Newark to Morristown. And he was going to build. So he brought the plans to Lubavitcher Rebbe. Came from Montreal with the plans, and the Rebbe asked him, like, what's going so small? He said, "What do you mean? I don't have the money." So the Rebbe asked him, "Do you have the money for the small building?" He says, "No." So he says, "You don't have the money for the small building. Just pray a little more, and you have money for the big building." I said, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock. I'm usually in bed. I said, for Zev, doesn't make a difference. Even 1 o'clock in the morning.
I'm glad you're here.
It's been a real honor and a fascinating experience.
And I got to get you back to some other books, including about Beryl Levy. 20 books. He's fascinating writer. Dovid Zaklikowski. The book is Dear Rebbe. Make sure you get it. If you go to DearRebbe.com, get 20% discount by mentioning Talkline. Do that. Then we're still giving away some free books. So that's ZevBrenner@gmail.com. Send us an email. Put Dear Rebbe. Then Bob will give away a couple more books. That's ZevBrenner@gmail.com. Thank you, David, for being here live in our studio. Thank you, Menachem Ben Shimon, for bringing him in, making sure that we do the program. So thank you. And stay tuned next for Lebedika Al Gordon. And today I'm back with you Sunday at 9 o'clock on WOR 710 AM, WVIP 93.5 FM HD2, America's only Jewish FM HD channel, 24 hours a day. And our special guest is Pat Boone. He's an Oav Yisrael. He's one of the big legendary folk singers, and he's composed, Exodus, Your Land is My Land, This Land is My Land, and we'll get to hear a fascinating discussion. Join us, of course, weeknights, 24 hours a day at WVIP 93.5 FM HD2, and of course, 7 o'clock weeknights here on WSNR 620 AM. Next week, 11 o'clock, L'Chaim, with Chaim, with a very special broadcast, Yoshua Worth. Thank you for listening. This is the Talkline Network. Okay, and this is the show close. And
Thanks for listening.
For continuous Jewish programs, TalklineNetwork.com, or our 24-hour-a-day listen line at 641-741-0389. For past shows, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, Instagram, and all major podcast platforms, or Jewish podcast.